Hello, this is Sam from Sound on Sound magazine. I'm at the NAMM show in Anaheim, California, and I'm super excited to be joined by the mix engineer, Manny Marroquin. Hello, mate. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
An absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
Obviously, one of the greatest names on the planet in the world of mixing.
Thank you.
And you've actually introduced a signature product here on the Audeze stand.
Well, check it out. So, my dream in the studio was always to, now you have a laptop. Now your studio is your laptop, and you have a set of speakers, monitors. So, I've been at Layer B Studios for over 23 years now. And as I travel more, as I go to hotel rooms, as I go places, I wanted something that would translate really well outside of my studio. Because I'm still on the console, I'm still mixing, I'm a dinosaur. And I always wanted something that I can take with me. And this is about 5 years ago when I met Audeze. I thought they were probably the best headphones I've heard. I mean, audiophile, more of a consumer product. And I thought, okay, well, I couldn't use these because they're maybe a little heavy. And I may need to wear them for maybe a couple hours at a time, and then I don't want to get a headache because it's too heavy and this and that. But they sound beautiful, so that's where the conversation started on how we could make something that's, more useful for creators. So my goal was always to make something that was for creators, like myself. So open back was the way to go. Honestly, this is the best headphone I've heard. And the first time I had the LCDX, I spent a whole day mixing a song. And if he had said that a few years before that I would mix something in headphones, I thought you were crazy, because I never saw headphones as an essential tool in the studio. I always thought, unless you're recording, obviously, but I always thought of a headphone as enjoyment after you're done with it. So that's a different way of thinking, and I always wanted to do that. And Audeze was crazy enough to allow me to do that. And here we are. 5 years later, finally we launched it. Obviously COVID set us back a little bit, but man, I'm just so proud of being associated with a company like Audeze that, anything I said, they were, yep, let's do it. They weren't like, oh, well, we got to sell headphones. We got to do this. We got to save money here, which of course is still a business, don't get me wrong. But they always took the approach of artistry first and quality first, and then let's see what happens, So I don't know many companies that would be able to do that on a mass, if you're trying to mass produce headphones,
Well, that's interesting what you're saying about the challenges of mixing on headphones, because I guess we've all been there. You do what sounds like a good mix on the headphones, and you put it up on the speakers next day, and you're like, oh man,
like, what the hell was that? Yeah. Happens all the time. Yeah.
So what's different about the Audeze models for you?
For me, headphones were always like, they were always too hyped, right? So then if you're creating, or in my case, mixing on them, you tend to shape things differently. So then when you put it up on your studio, you're like, oh, sounds a little not exciting because they're overhyped. So you can't do that. And then you have other headphones where it's just the low end is really hyped. So now you're EQing 808s and EQ kicks and bass, and all of a sudden you play it and it's underhyped. So you can't change that. And to be able to adapt to that, it may take you years. We don't have years. So for me, I wanted a flat sounding headphone. I'm like, hey, what if I add an 808, if I add whatever, 100 hertz, does it translate in the studio? And that was the approach of, let me try a couple mixes here. And especially on the low end, like, pop music today, whether it's country, rock, alternative, whatever it is, popular music today, one thing that has in common is your low end information. Like you gotta be able to differentiate that 808 and that kick and that bass. They have to coexist, but they can't get in the way of each other. That takes a lot of practice and a lot of, tweaking in the studio to kind of carve and shape. I was never able to do that with headphones.
Even with, for instance, headphone frequency correction or room modeling on headphones, you never got to where you were previously?
Never.
Not comfortable?
No. I never got to it because I was always compensating for it. And when I mix, personally, I go based on, emotion. I tend not to pay attention to what it sounds like. Sound may sound weird as a mixer, right? but I rather something feel good and feel right. And then eventually, naturally, you're gonna tweak the sound anyways. But for me, number one is just to be able to feel, have emotion, and honestly, it's just having the producer and the artist vision come to life. And how do we shoot it with some steroids, you know? And for me, this is just another tool now where I didn't have before. So now imagine the traveling producer, the bedroom producer that, hey, we're gonna go rent a house and we're gonna do the album there, right? Which happens all the time. Now you can bring your Endestans or your Neumanns or Barefoot, whatever you're monitoring on. But I feel like the more references that you have, the better. And then now if you learn your references, now you have another bag of tricks that you can bring out, and now you have something that you can actually travel with. And now you can go on the plane and go anywhere in the world, any hotel room in the world. Now you can have another reference point. Be a little harder to take your Endestans on the plane. Well, you may be able to do that, but you may not want to do that. So now it's like a less expensive way to have a good reference. Again, it's not going to replace anything. It's not, but it will be a good addition to your arsenal.
Yeah, for sure. So when you mix now, are you always referencing on headphones?
Now I am. I never used to reference on headphones, ever. So now every mix that I have done in the last 3 years has gone through these. Because we've been had the prototypes and we've been developing it, and every mix in the last 3 years has gone through these.
So if you're familiar with the existing Audeze models like the LCDX,
Yep.
how would these be different from ones that have been around before?
Well, first thing you'll notice is the design. It's a little sleeker, a lot lighter. My thing was always look, if I'm going to have an LCD5, it's probably the best sounding headphone that I've ever heard. But it's a heavy headphone. It's and then, if you want to really spend a couple of hours mixing something, producing or making a beat or anything, man, you're gonna, you may get a headache. You may get fatigue. It's easy to get fatigued with some of those. Those to me are if I want to have a glass of wine and listen to Dark Side of the Moon, that's the best experience. Everybody should do that. These were more of a working headphone. I want to be able to wear these for hours if I need to. The sound is I got to put it up there with the LCD5. I mean, it's pretty. And listen, forget about cost or anything for a second. But it's much easier to spend less money on something that could be as equal of a quality. And if you're not familiar with the LCD5, I mean, we're at NAMM. If you're, you got to check them out. They're amazing. So for me, it was really important to be associated with a company that pays attention to quality. Again, going back to the quality and not cutting any corners. So for us, with Shankar, the CEO, it was just how do we keep the quality? But how do we make it so that creators can use it as well and not be the funny speaker on your head, which is that's what it is. That's what a headphone is.
So I guess one issue with Planar magnetic headphones historically is they're quite insensitive and quite hard to drive. But obviously in the situations you're talking about where you're on the road, you're in a hotel room, you don't really want to be carrying around a high power headphone amp. You want to be able to drive them directly from your laptop.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that that's what you've done with these new ones.
Well, that was really important. And again, going back to mobility, that was really, for me, number one was obviously the quality of the headphone. Number two was mobility. Don't get me wrong, any headphone will sound better with an amp, right? But we made these so that you can actually just plug right into your laptop and you can drive them almost too much. I never turn the volume all the way up because they can drive, and the quality is there. So that was very conscious decision on being able to, again, this is it, my cord, my laptop, and I have basically a studio, so no need to carry any additional amps. But if you have room in your luggage for a smaller amp, go for it, but not necessary.
And do you like to mix loud or do you mix fairly quietly?
I go depending on the session. I mean, on the song and the artist. Man, I'm blessed enough to be working with some of the greatest artists in the world right now. Actually, today is Saturday. Yesterday we had Post Malone's album release, which was a favorite album I'm coming off this Kendrick Lamar album, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. That says a lot because I've been mixing a lot of records. I'm also mixing like Ingrid Andress, which is like I don't want to say country, but very Americana, very soft, very round. So if I'm doing more of a clubby type of song, for the first half hour, I want to feel it. I definitely I want it to just punch me. And then after that, I go really low. And then I go medium. But my rule of thumb is when I'm mixing, I never want to stay on one volume, whether it's loud or soft, for long. Because as you know, sound is the most adaptable thing, right? Like we can adapt to this sound at one level. It doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's right. So I like to switch it up. I like to flip it. Like let me. Someone's like doing this, splashing water on your face. They're constantly like, okay, now I'm a reset.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm going with this, obviously. Is like speakers and headphones, typically, they don't react the same way when you do that. When you run your monitors really quiet and then you kick them up,
exactly.
It's not the same as when you just turn up the dial on your headphones.
Exactly.
But is that something that's you've cracked with this?
Same thing. Sometimes I'll get it to the point where, okay, this is comfortable. Whatever that is. Could be medium, whatever it is. Now I'm comfortable, now I'm getting to know the song and the headphones. And that could take me a pass. I know these so well now. By the second or third pass, then I start adjusting where my comfort level is, depending on what I'm working on. If I'm beginning a mix, and I always say I start every mix with the drums, even if the song has no drums in it. Like I imagine if it had drums. So I start with any sort of rhythm section. At that point, if I'm mixing, if it's a song with bass, sub, kick, sometimes many kicks, sometimes many snares, and I want to start shaping, just coloring, then I'll probably do soft, on the headphones so I can hear the quality of that kick and the 808 and the bass. Am I EQing? Am I leveling? Am I taking out? What am I doing to this sonic palette on the low end? And then it would be different if I'm doing just vocals, stuff. So I guess it really depends on what it is at the moment that trying to achieve. For me, there's no rule of thumb. So it's just like my normal monitors in the studio. There's like, do I feel like it needs to hit me in the chest? And then we'll do it that way. If not, then we'll go for the club. I mean, I mixed a lot of. I just mixed Pusha T, which is like one of the hardest albums, like hip hop wise. Like not only sonically, lyrically, it's massive, and and we did it with Pharrell and Ye, but that's a good example of if I start a mix like that, I started on my main monitors. But the crazy thing is I can also start it on these, which still blows my mind, by the way. Blows my mind that I have these Augsburger in my room, but I can actually start a mix on these, and it still translates. I mean, that's a dream come true for me, So I told Audeze, I'm like, for very selfish reasons, I'm like, hey man, this is what I want. Now, if people like it or if people want to go and get them, that's up to them. But for me, mission accomplished. And and I'm trying to be selfish in that way, where if I can use them, man, to me, it's already a success,
Well, I guess a lot of people will say if they're good enough for Manny Marroquin to mix them, they bloody well better be good enough for me.
There you go. I hope, yeah, Look, my thing is creating tools. I have a line of plugins with Waves that came out a few years ago. I use those plugins on every song I've ever worked on. I mean, ultimately I'm the user. Very similar approach with these. Like, ultimately I'm the user. I'm like I'm the guy that wanted these and almost needed more than one thing. And for the first time ever, I'm able to actually not cut corners. And I think that to me, all of a sudden that becomes an essential tool. Just like a plugin, just like your monitors, just like Pro Tools becomes an essential. I think that this is maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but it's like you being a vocalist and owning the best mic that's great, that's the best for your tone, right? I mean, I remember when I was working with Steve Perry when I was 21 years old. The guy would walk around with his M50s, a pair of M50s, and he would carry both of them just in case one wasn't sounding good that day. I mean, that's kind of like what this is for me. Like, it's not an M50, but it is essential for me now. Like, I can't go anywhere without it now. So, you know, Method Man, the rapper, used to say, "Hey, how can I want to make sure I sell an Eskimo fan, right?" But it's one of the best saying. I'm like, well, you know, I don't know if we need to sell these. They'll sell themselves. You know, we can talk about them, but you either gonna like it and you're not, and that's great. But let me tell you, if you give it a chance, it becomes an essential tool.
So are these available now?
Yeah, well, we're introducing them this week, but they're going to be available middle of July. With first shipments going out then, maybe second, third week of July.
And do you know what sort of retail price we're looking at?
I believe it's $16.99. So you know, it's definitely not the cheapest one out there, but no speakers.
Kind of cheaper than a pair of Augsburgers, though.
Exactly. Like even a pair of near fields, right? Like nowadays with their bi-amps. I mean, so. Investment wise, I let them say whatever you guys think makes sense for you guys, but I want to make sure that, you know, the people that really need them are able to buy them. You know, somebody texted me yesterday like, "Oh, hey, look, I can make monthly payments of like $200." I'm like, there you go. So there's no excuse for that. I feel like it's like buying. If you were to tell me how much it's an essential tool in your studio. For me, is always reinvest your investment and always invest in yourself, right? So that was the approach with these. Like, look, they're not going to be the cheapest, but they're going to be probably the best.
Well, I'm sure we've all had the experience where you buy the cheap thing and then 2 years later you're like, you know what, I should have just bought the expensive thing.
And you know, and when it comes to what we do, you just can't cut corners. You know, like this is like, you just can't like. So again, if it's an essential tool, you can't cut corners, you know? I mean, so what I recommend with anything, whether you're buying Audeze or not, is like, get used to it, work on it. I always say, when you pick these up, there's a level of confidence you gotta have. And I think that's everything. And I think that you can hear a confident mixer versus a not confident mixer. Like,
well, I'm really looking forward to becoming a confident mixer.
Thank you, man.
Manny,
Well,
thank
me
you so
too.
much. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you.
So good to see you, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, you too. Have a great time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.